If you're a Sigma INFJ, you've probably heard it all before. You're hard to read. You're too intense. You're quiet, but it feels like something's going on in your head all the time. And they're right, something is going on in your head. But most people never get close enough to know what it is. You live with a mind that never stops moving, an emotional depth that few people can hold, and a quiet independence that others often misunderstand as coldness or distance. But the truth is, you've just never fit inside the box most people want to put you in. The Sigma INFJ isn't your average introvert. You're not just quiet, you're focused. You're not just sensitive, you're aware. You walk your own path, even when it means walking alone. And while you care deeply about the world, you don't feel the need to be seen in it. You don't follow crowds, and you don't chase connection just to feel included. You move in silence, but your inner world is louder than most people could imagine. That's why people don't understand you. The psyche of a Sigma INFJ is layered, sharp, private, and complex. It isn't something you show easily, and it definitely isn't something others can figure out on the surface. People try to guess, label, analyze, but they always seem to miss the mark. Not because you're hiding, but because they're not looking deep enough. This video is for you, the one who walks alone but feels everything, the one who leads without needing attention, the one who has been misunderstood more times than you can count. We're going to explore 6 reasons why your mind is so hard to understand, and why that's not a weakness. It's part of what makes you rare. Let's begin with the first reason. It has everything to do with the way you think, but never say out loud. Reason number 1. Unspoken internal complexity. There's a lot going on in your head at any given time. Thoughts, feelings, ideas, predictions, all layered, all alive. But you don't talk about most of it. You hold it in. You observe. You analyze. And by the time someone asks what you're thinking, you've already had 5 conversations in your own mind. This is what makes the Sigma INFJ psyche so hard to read. You process things internally. You don't need to share every thought to understand it. And in fact, most of the time, sharing would just slow you down. You prefer to sort things out privately before you ever speak them out loud. To others, this can look like you're distracted or disconnected. But in truth, you're simply tuned into a frequency they don't hear. You're thinking about what they said and what they didn't say. You're comparing it to past patterns, watching for contradictions, reading tone and timing. You're building a map that no one else can see. It's not just intellectual, it's intuitive. You don't need evidence to know something feels off. You don't need proof to sense when something deeper is happening. Your mind doesn't just collect facts, it makes connections, and those connections often reveal truths before anyone else notices them. Because you rarely explain your thought process, people don't know what you're picking up on. They might assume you're quiet because you have nothing to say. But in reality, you're holding back everything you could say, because most people wouldn't get it, or worse, they'd dismiss it. Your internal world is detailed in private. You don't let just anyone in. And that makes people uncomfortable. They want access, but they don't realize that earning your trust means respecting your silence. This inner complexity is your strength. It's how you move through life with such clear insight. But it also creates distance between you and the people who expect you to be more obvious. They don't understand your psyche because it was never built for surface-level interaction. You see too much, feel too much, think too deeply. And unless someone can sit with that kind of depth, they'll never truly know what's going on behind your eyes. Reason number 2. Strong need for independence and solitude. One of the things that truly sets a Sigma INFJ apart is your complete comfort with being alone. Not just occasionally, not just when you're tired, but regularly and by choice. You don't fear solitude. You rely on it. This need for space is misunderstood all the time. People think you're avoiding them, that you're pushing them away, that something's wrong. But nothing is wrong. In fact, when you're alone, everything finally starts to feel right. You process your thoughts better without noise. You feel your emotions more clearly without distraction. You recharge your energy in silence, not because you dislike people, but because you carry so much emotional weight when you're around them. Even when you're with someone you like, there's still a part of you that needs to pull back afterward, just to breathe again. This need for independence isn't just about introversion. It's deeper. It's about freedom of thought, freedom of space, freedom to move through life without constant explanation or interruption. You don't like being boxed in, managed, or forced into groupthink. You don't need a crowd to feel valuable. You don't need constant affirmation to know who you are. And this is where the misunderstanding happens. In a world that celebrates attention, popularity, and group belonging, someone who chooses solitude is seen as strange, or worse, broken. But you're not broken. You're just self-contained. You don't reach for connection to fill a hole. You connect when it feels real. Otherwise, you're fine walking alone. People take this personally. They think you're distant. They assume you don't care. But what they don't realize is that your distance is often a form of respect. You give people space. You give yourself space. And only when the time and energy feel aligned do you step in fully. Your need for solitude protects your mind. It protects your peace. And most people won't understand that because they've never needed silence the way you do. Reason number 3, deep mistrust of shallow connections. Sigma INFJs are wired for depth. You don't just want to talk, you want to understand. You want to get to the root of people, ideas, emotions, and intentions. You want to know why someone is the way they are, not just how they act on the surface. This creates a real problem in today's world, where most conversations stay shallow. People bond over trends, jokes, shared complaints, or surface-level drama. And while that works for many, it feels empty to you. You can do it when needed, but after a while, it starts to feel fake, like you're pretending to care about something that means nothing. You're not interested in collecting contacts, being invited everywhere, or being liked by everyone. What you want is real connection, something honest, something grounded, something mutual. And because of that, you've learned to mistrust relationships that form too fast or feel too easy. You know from experience that fast friendships often fade just as quickly. You'd rather sit in silence with someone genuine than make small talk with someone who's putting on a show. You don't need people to impress you. You need them to be real. But here's the issue. Most people don't operate that way. They expect instant rapport. They want smiles and casual talk. They mistake your calm energy for distance, or worse, for judgment. And when you pull away from those shallow moments, they feel rejected. But you're not rejecting them. You're rejecting the performance. Because of this, people often assume you're antisocial, guarded, or uninterested. But really, you're just filtering. You're protecting your time and energy. You're refusing to invest in anything that feels fake. You're waiting to see who can meet you where you actually live, below the surface. This deep mistrust of shallow interaction isn't bitterness. It's clarity. And for those who've never needed anything more than surface-level contact, your standards make no sense. But for you, they're necessary. They're how you protect your mind from being crowded with noise that doesn't matter. Reason number 4, high standards for authenticity and integrity. You don't just value truth, you require it. As a Sigma INFJ, your internal compass is strong. You can't fake your way through conversations. You can't pretend something feels right when it doesn't. And you can't respect people who say one thing and do another. This makes your standards high, not in a demanding way, but in a deep, quiet, non-negotiable way. You don't need someone to be perfect. You just need them to be honest, to be who they say they are, to follow through, to admit when they're wrong, to speak with intention and act with care. When people break those unwritten rules, even in small ways, you feel it. You might not call it out directly, but something shifts. You become quieter, less open. You pull back, not out of anger, but because something in the trust broke. And this is what confuses people. They think everything was fine. They didn't do anything wrong. But to you, actions speak louder than words. A small lie, a broken promise, or even a subtle sign of manipulation isn't just a mistake, it's a warning. And you listen to those warnings. Your high standards aren't about judging others. They're about staying aligned with your own values. You know how much energy it takes to trust someone, so you don't offer that trust lightly. You watch how people treat others, how they handle pressure, how they talk when no one's watching. And if something feels off, you don't ignore it. This kind of internal filtering makes others feel like they're being silently tested. And in a way, they are, not because you're looking to catch them doing something wrong, but because you need to know what's real before you invest emotionally. You expect integrity because you live with it. And for those who aren't used to being held to that kind of standard, it can feel intimidating or even offensive. But for you, it's simple. If you can't be honest, you can't be close. Reason number 5, disproportionate sensitivity to emotional inconsistency. Most people can deal with a little emotional contradiction. A friend says one thing but acts another way, or someone gets distant without explaining why. It might be confusing, but they move past it. For you, though, those moments feel massive. As a Sigma INFJ, your emotional sensitivity is tuned so sharply that even small shifts in someone's behavior hit hard. You feel when something is off, even if nothing obvious happened. A different tone. A change in body language. A pause that didn't used to be there. You don't ignore those things, you feel them, and they stay with you. This makes your relationships more intense, even when they look calm on the outside. You're always sensing what's happening below the surface, and when people aren't being emotionally consistent, it unsettles you. You start asking yourself what changed, what you missed, or what's going unsaid. And here's the hard part. Most people don't even realize they're being inconsistent. They say, "I'm fine," when they're not. They promise things and forget. They shift their mood and expect others to adapt. But for you, every one of those changes means something. And when no one explains them, you start to lose trust. It's not about being dramatic. It's about emotional safety. You don't feel secure when the emotional ground keeps shifting. You don't want perfect people, you want stable people. People who say what they mean and mean what they say. People who don't leave you guessing. When that consistency is missing, it's not just disappointing, it's disorienting. It shakes your inner sense of connection. And instead of confronting it aggressively, you often just back away. You detach. You give up trying to understand someone who clearly doesn't know how to be steady. This makes others think you're too sensitive or too serious. But in reality, you're simply tuned in more than they are. You notice what they overlook. You feel what they don't even acknowledge. That level of emotional awareness isn't always understood. But it's real, and it's part of why people can't grasp how your mind works. Reason number 6. In a world that is richer than what's visible. To most people, you're calm, polite, maybe a little distant. You seem like someone who keeps things simple. You don't share too much. You don't make a scene. You move quietly through life. But what they don't see is everything that's happening inside you. The inner world of a Sigma INFJ is massive. It's filled with thoughts, questions, ideas, patterns, visions, and emotions. You're not just thinking about what's happening, You're thinking about what it means. You build stories in your mind. You imagine outcomes. You reflect on past conversations for days. You live in layers. You might not say much, but your silence is full of detail. While others talk about daily tasks or surface-level plans, your mind is exploring ideas, solving emotional puzzles, or working through abstract patterns. You're connecting things in ways that don't always make sense to the outside world, but feel completely natural to you. You create meaning from things most people overlook. A simple look. A short message. A repeated pattern. You file it all away and use it to build understanding. That's why your insights often surprise people. They didn't even notice what you were tracking the whole time. You also have a rich emotional and symbolic world. You attach meaning to music, dreams, art, silence. You use imagination not just to escape, but to understand. Your inner world helps you process pain, plan your next steps, and make sense of what feels overwhelming. But because this world isn't visible, people assume it isn't there. They think you're quiet, and they stop there. They don't ask questions. They don't wonder what you're carrying. And if you don't open up, they may never know how alive your mind really is. That's why they don't understand your psyche. Because it's hidden, not by accident, but by design. You don't let just anyone in. You protect what matters. And your inner world isn't something you explain easily. It's something someone has to earn the right to experience. Until then, it stays where it's always been, deep, unseen, and powerful. The psyche of the Sigma INFJ is built differently. It doesn't follow the patterns people expect. It doesn't need approval, spotlight, or constant attention. It needs clarity, solitude, integrity. And most of all, it needs space to exist without being forced to explain itself. That's why so many people misunderstand you. You don't operate like others. You don't react the way they think you will. You don't open up on demand. And because of that, they think you're cold, complex, or too hard to figure out. But what they miss is that your quiet mind is a gift, not a problem. These 6 reasons are not weaknesses. They're strengths. Your internal depth, your independence, your high standards, your intuition, none of it makes you broken. It just makes you hard to access for people who don't slow down long enough to really see. And you know what? That's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to live truthfully, even if that means being misunderstood by most. If you're a Sigma INFJ, don't waste time trying to fit into shallow spaces. Don't keep opening yourself to people who don't listen. And don't ever shrink your mind to make others comfortable. You weren't made to follow. You were made to see clearly, even when no one else does.